Donna Habersaat content audits and how to get start from a huge pile of pages and URLs and get it into a manageable amount that you can actually audit and go through. Go through how I went through a variety of clients and came up with a method to reduce the amount of things that you actually really need to go through, and putting it into a system that is manageable as you go through it. If you have questions, just ask. Interrupt me, ask. I don't mind at all. I'd rather it be a conversation than just me talking. So feel free to interrupt at any time. If it's something I'll get to later, I'll say so. Explain. So the first thing is you have those thousands of pages, maybe 10,000, 40,000, 60,000, 100,000 pages. Does it all need to be reviewed? That's the first question. Usually, no, which is great. So we can start off with kind of just looking at broad sweeps of things that we don't need to look at. And some of those are kind of like initiatives that you know you're going to retire. So for one of our clients, it was a university client, each department had a blog. And they knew they didn't want to go forward with department blogs anymore. I should say they're not going to go forward with department blogs on their main site. They were going to migrate all those to WordPress, and that was going to be a different thing to handle. And so they're like, we don't have to review any of those pages. Huge chunk of pages, gone. Don't have to be reviewed. Not our problem at this time, in this phase, and for this scope of the project. So it would be something they'll review later. Again, if the content is moving to a different domain, like the blogs were moving for a different domain, they had another university client had a lot of their intranet content, what the faculty needs to do and all that on the main site, and they decided they wanted to bring that internal. So they knew that those pages were going. So that's another project they were just able to move over and take care of. Integrated content, things that are coming from different sources, databases and systems, things that are integrated. Usually all your courses, what are they, how many credits they are, what the descriptions are, where those are, job postings, that's another thing that's usually integrated. So all those stuff might not need to be migrated over. And then for one of our media publishers, they had in progress initiatives and programs. And they lasted between 5 and 15 years, these programs and initiatives. And they wanted to keep all the pages that were created as a record. It wasn't a lot because it's a long time. But then the ones that are retired, they took all those out and just created a summary page that explained it. And so went from many pages just to one, to be able to explain what they did when now that initiative's over. So those are some ways of identifying things that you can clearly mark that you don't need to audit, and that just helps reduce that pile down some. Do you yourselves have things similar that you might be able, just thinking off the top of your head, that you don't need to be?
We have one of all of the everything you just mentioned.
Yeah. Okay. Cool. I found that to be really, really common. Phases. Not everything needs to be reviewed at the same time. What this is about is turning this big pile into smaller, and turning big goal into smaller goals, and just getting slowly through those goals. So identify the things that need to be ready at launch. What is it that you absolutely need? Let's concentrate on those first and get those not only reviewed but also probably edited is what we're going to need. Also, I worked for a university extension, which it's a land grant, so they help farmers and ranchers and educate them. Texas A&M would be an example of a Texas extension school. And so all their content is really seasonal. So they have things, we're relaunching in winter. So their content that's more appropriate for summer, we're like, okay, we can wait on this. It doesn't need to be ready at launch. You can take time and figure out and post it later. So we went through all the content, but we also created a month-by-month schedule of what pages they're going to review in each month and when they're going to be ready by, so that they're going to be ready before all the summer content will be all ready before the ranchers and the farmers needed it. So that was a good one. And then another thing that we did with both lots of universities that I've worked with and the media publisher was a continuous improvement plan. Can't edit everything. One university we were working on, they were launching just before the school year, and we decided to migrate all of the faculty bios and profiles and all that information as is. And then after this summer, this coming summer, coming up, they will edit those. We decided to edit those during the summer when the faculties are not teaching, and it's much easier, and they actually have the time to look at those pages and edit them, versus during the school year. Another thing that they wanted to edit later, and doing it as a continuous improvement plan, is their research centers. So they have like 12 to 15, if I remember correctly, research centers that are producing content and studies. But we decided to migrate them as is, and then we set it up a plan. And it was like, okay, we can't just say this is coming, we gotta have that plan. I wanna be sure that as you go to your bosses and you say, we're not gonna worry about this right now, we're going to worry about this in April. And this is the plan, and these are, each month, these are the, this is the center we're going to look at, these are the pages we're going to look at, and we're going to get organized. This is the team that's going to do it. So we present them with a plan that they don't have to worry about. How is your content? Do you have seasonal content? Universities probably do. School, ISD?
The content, the generation of the content is seasonal, such that at the beginning of the school there's a lot of content, but nothing ever dies, you know.
So is it like
you have a lot of news stories that go into an archive, and that's a record of what happened when, and that's the intentional never dies stuff. And then there's the unintentional never dies stuff of people that stuff that gets posted because of that event, whatever. And now you have 500 URLs that existed at some time, and there's no owner of them.
Okay. I think content does die and retire.
It should die and
yes,
retire.
I believe there should be retirement of content, news stories and previous years and stuff like that. When users are searching and they get all those results, and from previous years they're looking at something and it's like, oh God, this is from 2016. I don't need 2016 information, but it shows up in the search results. That frustrates the user. So retiring content actually improves the user experience. So love to talk more about that with you.
What we've wound up with is we're declaring content bankruptcy. And a lot of the migration is getting lumped into the, we're just not going to migrate that bucket.
Yep. I will definitely talk about that, yes.
What you mean by retire? Is that like delete, archive, take off, hide some more on the box?
So, some of it is all the above. I am in more of a favor of it not being on the website itself, that it's not published. For certain universities, that meant we moved it into their archival system, which was an entirely separate system. And it's usually more like annual reports and things like that they had, as opposed to news and events. Those just a lot of times can get deleted. I'll talk a little bit more about those. But so for a lot of it, I want it out of the website. And a lot of people are just like, well, we need the archive and stuff like that. Well, we can look at the Google Analytics and see how many people are actually looking at it. Is it worthwhile keeping it? Usually not. And if it is needed, they can always request it, and it can be in that separate archive that's not, I'm a big proponent of your website is not your archive. And so that the archive is something else. It's archiving everything on your website, there's not as much financial cost of like server space and stuff like that, maintenance. There is some, but it's not as significant as it used to be. It is, to my opinion, there's the cost of your reputation and being able to find things and being easy to navigate, and users getting in there, finding the information, and getting back out. That's usually what they're looking to do. They're just wanting a question answered and move on. So to me, that's where the biggest thing is that reputation cost. And so I'm a big proponent of actually just getting it out and putting it somewhere else. And you'll see how many times people actually request for information. It's not that often. And maybe that's maybe it's a different site. Maybe there's some sort of accessibility to it where it's where you can get to it, but it's sort of not like a website. Like you have to pull it up out of the database where it's not always there. Different systems like that. Anybody else have a lot of seasonal content or things they can think about that they can do in phases, or is it a continuous improvement project?
We have educational programs that run throughout the year, some during different seasons, some go away.
Right.
There are initiatives that are grant-based where the grant's there and then it's not, or then it comes back, so
Yep.
we deal with that a lot too.
Right. I had one of our university clients, they had the study abroad programs too, and they're like, this one's here once every like 2-3 years. And so we debated about it, like, well, should we only show the ones that are currently available, or should we show the ones that are also going to be up in a couple of years so that people can plan? Like, oh, I know I want to go see that one later. I want to participate in that one. We had this huge debate about it. Most of it was most of their programs were master studies, so there's 2 years. People are there for 2 years, and so it was like, well, it's not really a very long time for planning. It's like they're kind of going to miss it, maybe. So, yeah, it was a kind of a tricky situation with the study abroad, for sure. Yeah. See what else? Oh, here we go, the retention schedule. Yes, everything should have a retention schedule where things do get removed off of the website and deleted. So for events, a lot of our universities are just like, once it's over, take it down immediately afterwards. And I was like, okay. I always thought maybe a little at a time so people could know what had happened, but they were like, nope. For annual events, our media publisher had some annual events that it was like a big festival, music festival that they did. And I was like, well, I want to keep 1 year of it because I want to use that as promotion for the next year. And people can see what happened, what it's like, and things like that. So only keep 1 year of it, and you can refer back to it and help promote it. If meetings have assets, do they post notes? Do they post the presentations? Do they post the minutes of it and things like that? Then maybe keeping it a month. That gives them a month time to go back to it and get those and see those. Otherwise, then put it in the archive so you still have that record of what happened. You laughed. So how do you think they would respond to something like that?
We have meeting agendas and minutes going back to 2008.
Mm-hmm. Yep. And nobody's looking at them. It's important to have, and there's legal requirements, but it doesn't always.
Pretty certain they don't require going back to 2008.
Right. Nor does it necessarily need to be required to be posted online. They have to be available. That doesn't necessarily mean it has to be on your website. It means that it's available upon request. People can request it and get it.
I just had that same argument last week.
Yeah. How'd it go?
Fine. The issue is in Texas, if you're a state or if you're an agency, you have to declare conflicts of interests. And there was a question of, do we have to post everybody if they don't have a conflict? Do we have to post that they don't have a conflict? or just the people that actually have a conflict.
Yeah.
And so I went and looked, and we had 1,040 of these questionnaires that had to be posted, and exactly one of them had anything to declare.
Oh.
And so 1,039 of them are not going to make the migration.
Right. Right. Yay! That's 1,039 pages we're not looking at. Yay! Generally for press releases, newsletters, news articles, and reports, I keep a rotating 12-month cycle of them. So as each month comes up, the 13th month gets dropped off. So you have 12 months posted, but nothing more of that.
When you say dropped off, does it like go into an archive section that's still publicly available on the website somewhere, or is it like completely? It's maybe in the CMS. It's just not published to the front end.
I would prefer it that way.
Okay.
I would prefer it not published because, again, that user experience.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Always look at the analytics with it.
Yeah.
Are people actually accessing it? I'll jump ahead of a slide a bit, but there's always exceptions.
Yep.
So these are guidelines, and then there are exceptions. It's like the English language. So one of our universities is like, oh, but we had this press release, and it's from a while ago, but it was when President Bill Clinton came to our university and spoke. I'm like, well, of course we're keeping that. That's cool. Like, it was a couple of years ago. But yes, so there's always going to be some exceptions. So,
My marketing manager would fight me on that really hard because I brought that up. I guess her argument is that we want to show what we've done in the past. They're like,
create a summary page.
I like that. Okay.
Summary page. Put your highlights in there. What is it? X number of people served. So many attended it, and stuff like that. Create a summary page. So it's instead of people don't want to go through all of that information to individual pages to get it, but a summary page might get visited a lot more.
Would that include like personal, like student stories, like impact stories and things like that, or are we just?
You might want. So those are pretty good. I like having those for universities because then they really tell this, what it's like, the day of life, and what it's really there. So I find those good. But sometimes you need to update those. Sometimes they get stale. It's hard to get them to. You're always kind of constantly have to be an initiative with the students to get new ones. And some are going to just be better than others. And so some you may keep, and some might have a longer shelf life than others. So I think those might live in an exception area. Individual base assessment of those. That's what I would do with those, looking at them. Again, initiative programs, providing a summary of it just once it's all over. So what else? So now we get to doing a content inventory. I like to use a crawler. So I'm always using either, we used to use Dino Mapper. We now started using Screaming Frog SEO, Spider to crawl the websites. They can be tricky. There's times where one of the reasons why we had to switch from Dino Mapper to Screaming Frog was that if your Google Analytics had if you have multiple domains and you provide a filter into the Google Analytics so you can see what the domain name is in front of so you get a whole complete URL, that messed up Donna Mapper. And they were just like, well, we can't really fix it. And so I was like, oh, I'm moving on. And so there can be problems. Password protected areas can be an issue that need to work out. Each of those are kind of like its own little subtopic of being able to do it. But getting a crawl of all your website, and so you're getting the URL, you're getting what type of page it is, you're getting the status of it, you're getting the file size, how long it takes to load, getting all the metadata, and then also the character counts for each of the metadata. You're getting all of the tools. You're allowed to incorporate Google Analytics right into it. It has an API, so it connects it, so you get the information of page views and entrances and exits and what else do I have in there? Time on page being other ones are important. You get word count of it. It provides you so much more than an export of the CMS could, export out of Drupal, that I'm like, do this. Most of the tools will allow you to do it for 500 pages for free. Never enough for us, unless you're small sites or individual sites. But we're usually looking at more. I think it is worth the money to get it. A lot of time, well, you can do a subscription for a month and get it, and then not need it anymore. You know, so we've done all sorts of things. Now we end up just keeping ours because we have it need for it so often with so many clients. But so it gives you all this information that you can use to start assessing it and get it in an Excel file. So do that. Has anybody used any of these sheets, any of these tools before to success?
I know our content strategy team uses, I think, Dynamapper, and maybe use the other one.
What's great is you can continuously update that, and so you can use it as in your content lifecycle planning and seeing how it is. So, for the spreadsheet, I end up, for my spreadsheet, what I end up doing is I keep the original tab, is the original data that I just put in. I duplicate that tab, and then I start messing with it. And I create a bunch of other tabs, and I just start moving rows to different tabs. And like we talked about those broad sweeps of things that we don't need to review, I create a tab of those, and I just move that content out of there, those URLs. And I kind of identify those URLs. A lot of times you can buy the structure of the URL itself or the top page title. You can start to see where those are. Phases, content we identified in the phases. You know, this is in the continuous improvement. This is the research continuous improvement. This is the faculty bios continuous improvement. This is the May content for the agriculture community and what they need. So I just kept moving those on. Retention schedules, things that, I set up those guidelines of 1 year for newsletters, everything older than a year, boom, into that. Just move it out. Move out those newsletters, move out those events. We don't want to keep them. We don't want to move them over there. So we know they can not need to be reviewed. And then underperforming, and that's the Google Analytics, which I think I get to next. I think that's next. Yeah, performance. Then identifying which pages are underperforming. So being that we have all the Google Analytics connected to it, we can look at those. And I work with the client to determine what are baselines for them. Everyone's going to have different baselines of what it should be. So I always get at least a year's worth of analytics data when I'm doing that crawl through Screaming Frog, because content can be seasonal. And I want to be sure I get the whole season of whenever they're in, like the fall when they first started a semester, graduation time. There's just pages that are only accessed then. So I want to be sure I get a full year. And then I look at those and, just kind of determine baselines, how much time on page, if it's too short of time, they're not reading it. They're just, reading a little bit. Oh, this is not satisfying what I need. This is not answering my question. Bounce out. Moving on to the next page. Page views, maybe, I don't know, it depends on your traffic, but is it 200 page views in a year? Is that your baseline for it? For our agricultural site, that was what we set it for. 30 seconds time on page, so they can skim it, see if it's the content they're not, but over 30 seconds they're actually reading it. Pages that have entrances. So these are pages that people Googled and then came in from an email or a social media post. These are pages that are driving traffic to your site. So I always like to highlight those that are performing well, and those that are not driving traffic to it. If your site is more, I don't want to say blog, it is a blog, but maybe I was talking yesterday morning, they do services so they're a university, and this division just provides services for all the rest of the divisions and the university. And so I'm like, oh, well, your people come with a question, want to get an answer, get the answer, and leave. You operate a lot like a blog. You're going to have a high bounce rate on your pages. That's actually good. Everyone's always saying the high bounce rate is pretty bad. But if they have a high, sometimes you want to compare the entrance and the exit rate to see if it's how that was. So if you're like that people are finding things in, having a high bounce rate is good. It's not necessarily a bad thing, I should say. Whereas if you're more like, I'm trying to recruit prospective students, and I want them to learn about the programs and what it's like here and what student life is here, how do you apply, how do you register, all that, where do you live? Well, then you want not to have a high bounce rate. You want to be sure that they're moving from page to page and stuff like that, and that's where you want that comparison to be a lower bounce rate. So that can help identify pages that are not performing so well. At a start, I take those and put them into one of those tabs. All those low performing, so they didn't meet the baseline. I just move them into a new tab. I know they're going to come back. I know there's going to be exceptions and they're going to come back. I know it's going to happen. I'm fine with that. There are certain types of pages that are kind of transition pages. Maybe there's a lot of options. You have a card grid system going on there, and there's a lot of options to get them moving. It's a hand holding where you're, especially for prospective students, and you're like, okay, we need to get to here or something. Like they need to get off to different pages. Well, then that is probably going to have low time on page. It should have a lot of traffic, I would think, but it might not meet all the what we consider high performance pages. And so I'm like, no, that's probably going to come back. Your legalese pages, all your legal requirement pages, going to come back. They're probably low performance, but they're going to come back. So, and then other things are going to be exceptions. But exceptions are on an individual page basis, not by a whole area. If people are like, oh, I need this whole area, I'm like, no, you're missing the point. You got to tell me which individual page should be exception. Beat myself to it. So yeah, legalese, contractually required. Things that get funded by certain grants, you sometimes have to have a lot of pages like that, information on there. And stuff, but yeah, there's always going to be exception. I made the comment about when President Bill Clinton appeared at the university, and the news releases and the press releases on that were exceptions for it. All right, so now we're getting to the manual review and getting to actual process. Hopefully we've eliminated, by doing this, I took the media client from over 40,000 pages to 11. And so it was 11,000 pages that we had to review.
I thought you meant 11 pages.
No, 11,000, sorry. 40,000 till, 11,000. So, I mean, that's a significant drop. But it's still 11,000 pages is a lot to review. So how did I do that? I next organized it into all the content. I have that one tab, to be reviewed tab. I organize them into subject matter areas because we have a lot of subject matter experts. They're all in their certain areas. The easiest example for me to explain this is with the agricultural land extension university. So they had people who really knew about cows, either beef or dairy, and then gardens and yards and trees, and horses, pigs and sheep, and land and water resources. So we just grouped it in sections, and this way here we can have those subject matter experts only reviewing those there. For that client, they couldn't. There were just like 500 is the most review. So the beef area had a lot of pages. It was a lot more than 500 pages just in that one subject area. So I grouped that into 2 sections or 3 sections or whatever it was. So I divided that up into. So it's dividing it into manageable amounts. Manageable is going to be different for everybody. But it's a matter of people, number of people you have, and the amount of time you have to complete it. Like I said, the one I was consulting with yesterday, she had 1,000 pages and she had a year. So it's perspective of what is manageable. and whatever else you have to do, because this is not your only job, that's for sure. It's always other things going on. So what you want to review on, it really depends on what your goal for your review is. A lot of times for us, it's usually content quality and content effectiveness, but you might also have competitive analysis. You want to compete against other universities, other institutions, or whatever, whoever your competitors are. If you're doing something going to global, if you're going to be more international, a lot of that has to change. You want to change your language. You want to be able to make sure it's easy to go for Google Translate, or if you're going to have pages actually translated professionally. And then, of course, there's also legal and regulatory reasons that you may want to do a manual review. But we normally do effective quality and effectiveness. And lots of things that we've come up with it has kind of been like your business goals. We always identify those. Long before the project, we reapply that time we took during discovery to figure out your goals and reapply that here. User goals. So we walk through all your personas. We do that in discovery, go through who your audiences are, what do they want to achieve, what are they trying to do, identify what their goals are. We apply that here. For the agriculture university, they had content that happens over again, flooding. It happens, all the time. Every spring, they would have flooding. So instead of have content that came out every year that talked about the flood in 2016 versus the flood in 2017 versus the flood in 2018, we just did a thing on flooding, how to clean up on it, proper procedure. So we had some like evergreen content. So that was a shift in their content strategy where they were required, their faculty were required to put 20% of their time throughout the year in creating content for the website. And I was like, so they just kept creating new pages, even though it was the same content. I was like, can we refigure that? Like, can we redefine what that means? And so can 20% be, I'm editing this page. I'm not writing a new page. I'm editing and updating it and making it accurate. Can 20% be, I'm posting to social media. I've created a video. I've done something else. Like, people have different skill sets. Some are good at talking off the cuff and wanting to be out in front of them, whereas others would rather be writing an article. Let's let each person excel where they excel. And so I was pretty amazed that their administration went with that and redefined what 20% meant. I was pretty excited about that. So other things, is it accurate? Is it current? Is it easy to read? Can you scan it? Is the voice and tone the correct? A lot of times over your time, you published something 5 years ago, it doesn't have this, you changed your voice and tone a little bit and modified that. So these are things that we score on, and they get added to the spreadsheet. So I add a column for each of them and able to score. I like to score by numbers, and I apply a number to it. I like as many as possible. I'm not sure how I'm doing time. Ooh, I'll speed it up. I like to do as many as ones, zeros, yes, no, so that it's less subjective as possible. So is it meeting business goals? For every goal that it's meeting, you get a point. So this one is meeting 3 business goals. For every user goal, it gets a point. So this one happens to be meeting 1. Is the content evergreen? Is it current? Is it accurate? Yes, no, give it a score going down. You can sum them up and then get a total of an individual grade, so that you get a total assessment in your spreadsheet for how they're grading. You get so anything that scores higher is getting is doing better. Anything that's scoring lower, the pages you need to work on. By having an individual assessment too, you know where you need to improve or get a little bit of an idea of where to improve. Reviewers. I like to spread the wealth around. I never want one person doing all the review. I want multiple reviewers for each page. I want to get different points of view and opinions on it. I want that subject matter expert, the ones who know if it's accurate, if it's current, that can really explain it, that has that knowledge. I want somebody who's not a subject matter expert. A lot of times I recruit from the marketing team or the fundraising team, different areas of that. to assess that, and they can do a good assessment of like, well, what am I supposed to get out of this? Are you just talking at me, or what's really in it for me? So you get that sort of insider opinion, and then more of a I guess outsider opinion going with that of who's it for, what's in it, and the value of it. You may want a content strategist. This may be your people on your web team who oversee the whole thing. Maybe loosely defined content strategist, but who's overseeing the content, who has perspective of not only these pages, but pages in other areas, and might be able to see pages where it can be merged and reduced, or 3 pages turn into one, making it more less pages, but more concise on what's going on. Sometimes you want an outside consultant if you just don't have the time to do it yourself. That's always a possibility too. Oh, go. And so I have more resources here. I wrote an article that's pretty much this presentation that you can see. The different types of reasons why you would and how you would assess on and grade. Like I talked about quality and effectiveness of content. A lot of that information I got out of the book of Content Audits and Inventories, a handbook. I really recommend that. It has a chapter for each of those reasons why you would go in there. They did an excellent job of explaining it, so I didn't want to rehash it. It was more just like, let's first get down that smaller size that we need to do. That's where I found that area needed kind of some work that wasn't talked about. And then here's a few other links. There's also some training. There's Confab conference, which is great. I went to it this year, and that's a great conference, and recommend that too. Any questions? Yeah. Any questions? Okay.
Are there any other tools, like systems you use that help with, auditing, at least the process of getting content audited and tracking that?
Besides like Excel?
Yeah, well, I'm just thinking like looking at content, getting it in front of like a writer or in front of a client so they can review it, not in the current CMS, like if they're migrating or creating net new content. Is there any like tools that you use or would recommend?
Let me make sure. So like actually looking at the page.
Like looking at it, applying notes or things like that.
I think I haven't had to do that. I've mostly been able to do it in Excel.
Okay.
There's also Airtable, and they have templates get created, and there is a template created for content audits.
Okay.
And that's fun. Airtable is like a database, a GUI interface for a database, basically. And it allows you to relate things and color code things. And I use Airtable for other projects, but I'm always like not going to require my clients to buy. You have to subscribe to them.
Mm-hmm.
I'm like, I'm not going to require them to subscribe to something.
Yeah.
So I'm always going to work in the tools that they have available. So I jump around between tools.
Okay.
But Airtable is great. Other things is we've used it more as the writing and putting in and updating as gather content.
I was gonna say that's one we're using as
Yeah.
well, but it's really expensive.
Yes. Yes.
But
So
it's awesome because they have a connector for Drupal,
Mhm.
so you can import content straight into Gather Content.
Yeah, it really helps with that whole rewrite before the new site is
Mhm.
ready to be put anything into it and stuff.
Okay.
So because rewriting takes a lot of time, and if you can start that earlier, the better it is. We've also worked it out where we didn't have gather content, and they were able to do things in documents, either Google Docs or Word.
Yeah. We used to, the writers all used to use Word, and now we're slowly getting them into, they're using Confluence.
Yep. Yep.
But it's still kind of a manual process to get it out of there and into the CMS.
Yeah, it's another. Confluence is another CMS
Yeah,
basically.
yeah.
So you have to export that out. and stuff like that. A lot of times where we have the biggest transition is that it goes from unstructured content to structured content, where we went from just one page of it and now we're going to paragraphs. And that's where we're like, okay, you know, having.
Is it possible? You're talking about paragraphs like the Drupal module. Is it possible to import something like that in any kind of?
You can use like gather content to map
Yeah.
it to a paragraph.
So like a specific field. Okay.
Yeah.
It's field to field level mapping.
Oh.
But again, it's pricey.
Yeah, I think you might be able to do with documents where you have things that break it up and you write a script to like note this is, but you have to then actually probably hand write in the thing, the identifier that breaks it up, that the script notes for it to go into different fields. That's beyond my technical experience, but I
Use
think
the
you can.
migrate module.
Yeah.
Yeah,
And wrote a custom migration.
yeah, we do that a lot. I mean, it's amazing. It's amazing how many clients are like, I've been to the clients where they're just like, we want to throw everything away. And I was just like, you really don't. You don't want to write all new.
Yeah.
It's so hard to write all new content. There's good stuff there. Let's not throw the baby out with the water. So yeah.
Documents are another one that kind of get missed, I think.
Like
during the
PDFs
holiday, like
and-
PDFs.
Yes.
We're working on a large site for a chemical company, and they've got all of these like safety data sheets and technical data sheets, and there's like thousands upon thousands
Yes.
of them.
Yep. And they get updated every year. Or
Well, luckily they're updated via like a nightly feed, but we have to like port that over into Drupal from their SharePoint instance.
and you have to make sure those documents are all accessible.
Yeah.
All those PDFs, yeah. I try to get rid, when we do a content audit, I look at the PDFs and I'm like, how many of these can be actually pages and not PDFs? So let's start out low and get those, and then let's keep moving on and looking at other, it's been the multi-100-page PDFs that they're the ones that we haven't really looked at getting them over. Usually that's always so out of scope for the project. Because I keep wanting to try that book module. I'm like, will that work? But you've never gotten a client to go for it yet. So, we'll see. It's always like phase 2.
Yeah. And then phase 2 somehow is like
Never happens.
Yeah, never.
I want to get a T-shirt that says, "We'll get to that in phase 2."
Yeah.
It's always right over there.
Yep,
It's
yep.
10 years later. And it's
Yeah.
exactly.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Any other questions? Go ahead.
I
Sorry.
was gonna say, like ongoing content auditing, after a new site goes live.
Yep. I'm sorry, I didn't get to that.
Ways to, I guess, kind of remind
Yep.
authors, like, hey, you need to go in and
I
take another
have-
look at this.
Yeah, what I do for that is I set up a monthly report that comes out of Drupal that is of every page that was created during that month that gets reviewed that month for the next year. So like usually every year. So they're reviewing their pages once a year on a monthly basis, so it's not this big overwhelming. That gets to the whole content lifecycle. That's a whole nother kind of topic and talk. I'll do that next year if you want. But yeah, always having so many clients are come into the situation. We've just been posting, we haven't done anything, so we have this big mess. I'm like, okay, that's not how we want to work in the future. This is how we're going to handle the big mess right now, and then this is how we're going to start. We're going to develop a governance system. We're going to have a content life cycle, and we're going to have retention schedules, and we're going to follow this and manage it more. Content needs to be managed, unfortunately.
So sorry, you're saying you generate a report of all the pages that were published that previous month, and then you review it within the first month, or?
So on a 12-month basis, a 12-month cycle. So it's January, I'm reviewing everything that was published. It's January 2019, I'm reviewing everything that was published in January 2018.
Okay.
So a year later.
Okay.
Usually a year is good. It kind of depends on your situation, on what your business is and how how things turn over or whatever. Usually that's good. Do you remember what time this was supposed to end? Oh, 10:15. Okay, I was thinking that it ended at 10, so that there's the 15 minutes in between. Oh, good. So we have more time, I think, right? Yeah, we have another 15 minutes. If there are any other questions. Did it help?
Yeah.
Yeah?
Reinforcement of things that, or obviously for me, reinforcement of things I did know, and extra things that, oh, I never thought of it that way, Wally.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, reinforcement of things that, like, on my team, we work with a lot of like content specialists and who don't have like web experience. So like things like getting, don't keep expired content or stale content up there. We get a lot of pushback for things like that. So it's good to hear your perspective and kind of reiterate those things that we push for.
Content audit is usually one of the most political things you're going to do in a web redesign. Yeah, because you 100 editors, right? That's 100 people you have to deal with and be sensitive to, and they're like, but I wrote this, I spent time on it, I don't want it to disappear. It's like, I'm on your side, is what we have to kind of align ourselves with the writers. So like, I'm on your side, I want good content up there, I want it to be the best that can be. It's a little outdated. Will you update it? Like, can you, things have changed or something like that, or that was a perspective of 5 years ago,
Yeah, or write in like more plain language.
Yes.
Like we have a lot of education specialists who have PhDs and want to write this really high level of language, but like teachers who are working in the classroom don't want to read something like that. They want language that they
even if they are that educated and things like that, they're coming there for such a short period of time.
Right.
They need something information. Mm-hmm. It's about getting it in and getting out, and getting the information they need as fast. Also, the more plain language, that's a whole nother talk. Plain language, and speaking of that Confab, if you need to get people to go there, they have some great things. They have some of their presentations that were recorded. Not all of them are recorded, and some of those that are recorded you can watch on their website from each year. But if the more plain language and accessible content is, easier for Google Translate, easier for everybody to understand. I mean, easier to understand a phone when you're distracted, when you have a limited amount of time. So it actually makes it more accessible by talking in and writing in a lower grade average grade range. So yeah.
I liked the scoring system.
Mm-hmm.
That seems like it would be sort of a no-brainer to.
Yeah, that seems really helpful.
Yeah, taking subjectiveness out of it, getting multiple people's opinions. The person I was helping yesterday, so it was they provide services for all the other areas. I was like, how about the people who request the services? Can they be some of your reviewers of the edit? Like, they're the ones who are actually using it. It's all in-house. It's still their faculty who are their end customers, you know? I'm like, maybe they can help with the review process and provide that perspective of, is it helpful for me? Is it too verbose? Does it provide me with good step-by-step instructions? Should I have little screen captures for each one of those steps for what I need to do and things like that? So sometimes maybe thinking outside the box of who your reviewers could be too. I like having multiple people, so removes the subjective. I'm like, only 4 people thought this, you know, or whatever. And yes, no, on and off as much as possible. Because then it's like, what's the difference between a 3 and a 4 on a 5-point scale, you know, or something like that. So, and when you go review everything, your team, you set up your guidelines and your instructions, and you share all that so you're on the same page. Everybody knows exactly how they're reviewing and how they're scoring it. They're all on the same page with that. So you have to be sure to share those guidelines and instructions. I forgot to say that, sorry. But yeah. Okay. Well, people are wandering around. If you want to go, I don't want to hold you captive. Feel free to contact me if you have any questions. I'm more than happy to help as you guys head into your processes and stuff like that. Any questions?
Oh, are you going to share those slides?
Yep. Yeah,
Okay.
definitely. I have no problem with that.
Okay.
Yeah.
Do you have a link, or are you gonna send it out?
However they want us to share, I'm gonna probably do that now.
Okay.
Because I didn't do it before yet.
Okay.
But yeah, I'll definitely share everything. The article in the first link is on our 4K website in our blog area, and it covers a lot of what was said in this presentation. So I wanted that up before the giving this presentation, so it'll be available for you. Cool.
Thank you.
Thank you. Appreciate it. Have a good day.